Sorry, I'm just going to, thank you for joining speakers. Thank you so much. So Prof. Jacko, thank you. I see your hand. Please may you ask your question. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the 3 presentations. It's really been interesting. I have a question for Dr. Naya. From your presentation, it seems like to be a PI, you must be a medical doctor and registered by the council. And I'm wondering, what about studies like nutrition? So you have a PhD nutritionist and wants to conduct a study on a nutritional product. Are they required to then have to get somebody else to be PI? That is one. The second one, you've talked about there has to be justification on how the study is going to benefit South Africans. And I'm wondering, is there any room for a clinical trial where it will benefit humanity and not just South Africans? So for example, we've been involved in Kenya in a clinical trial on a phase 1 trial on Ebola vaccine. We have never had Ebola in Kenya, but it is for the benefit of humanity if we get an Ebola vaccine. Thank you.
Thank you, Walter, for those questions. So moving on to addressing your first question around the role of the PI. So in a study, like in a nutritional study, where there's an intervention, there should be a clinician registered with the appropriate professional body to oversee safety issues and to monitor participant safety. And in that case, you don't have just a principal investigator, you have 2 co-principal investigators. So one being the scientist developing the investigational product, and the other being the clinician to monitor safety issues on the ground. And then the second, to address your second question in terms of doing research for humanity, of course we have to play that role. We have to address global challenges, but at the same time we have to make sure that whatever research is being undertaken is of relevance in our own situations. And we've learned that a lot during this COVID pandemic, and in terms of being involved in COVID vaccine studies and making that global contribution, but at the same time working out how South Africans will benefit from that. Will they have access to a vaccine, and under what conditions? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Prof. Jacko. May I just confirm that your question has been addressed, or if you have any follow-up on that?
Yeah, thank you. It's been well addressed. Thank you very much, Dr. Naya.
Thank you. So just Dr. Jackson, thank you. I do see that the chat function has been enabled. Colleagues, please add your questions to the chat. Dr. Jackson, I will come to your question in the chat after Prof. Richard Naidu. Prof. Naidu, please go ahead.
Thank you. My question is, can you hear me?
I'm sorry, Prof. Naidu, you're quite soft. I'm sorry, I'm not sure if it's just me, but.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, that's a little bit better. Thank you.
Sorry, just the microphone.
Oh, that's much better. Thank you.
I apologize for the construction noise behind.
Thank you.
I'm really sorry about that. So my question is directed to Jerome, and you alluded to 2 types of ethics in your talk. One on public health, and the other one's related to clinical ethics. Now, I just wanted some clarity. We in our division and department use formalin fixed paraffin bedded tissue for the use of for development of new diagnostic tests. These are molecular testing. Now, a lot of that, with the layered diagnosis comes the use of molecular testing and whole exome sequencing and genome sequencing, and the information is then fed into these bioinformatic pipelines. I just wanted some clarity on how the ethics works on that. Is it covered under the blanket ethics when patients undergoing procedures before their samples are sent off to our department, and how would it work? Thanks.
I think a lot will depend on whether the assay, for example, is an investigational assay, so it would be a research grade assay, or whether this is something that's been approved, for example, by SAPRA, and of course by SABS. So you'll find that, at the end of the day, these are the important criteria. If it's an investigational assay and you're trying to validate it or trying to test it, those types of results may not necessarily be governed by the same types of, for example, notification requirements as the approved assays. So if you are, for example, if your lab, and I'm not sure if this is what the question is revolving around, but if your lab is, for example, looking at that type of, testing or trying to validate an investigational assay, and you're diagnosing patients with COVID-19, I'm using this as an example, they may not necessarily be the same disclosure notification obligations to the Department of Health because it's an investigational assay. And your purpose there is, of course, research. It's not diagnostic for clinical or for public health purposes. So I don't know if that quite answers your question, but that would be the difference between a research grade investigational assay, your notification obligations, or your research, or your primary goal there is to test or validate it, versus an approved assay where your goal there is diagnostic in nature rather than investigational.
So the lines are quite blurry right now because the initial stage would be to develop these new assays using new molecular tools. And as we move further along with the research, it then gets into, perhaps I'll say, it pivots towards more research than to diagnostics. But the ultimate goal is to produce a better diagnostic. So that's why I asked the question.
Yes, I'm supposing that, when you are testing these new investigational diagnostics, you are benchmarking it against an approved standard of care or an approved diagnostic. And if an approved diagnostic, as an example, picks up that somebody has got COVID, that is an approved diagnostic. There would be notification obligations there. So, I'm supposing that you're not just testing samples with an investigational diagnostic and not benchmarking it against an approved diagnostic, because there would be different obligations in relation to each.
But the ultimate goal would be to provide an early diagnostic accompanied with improved clinical outcome and, of course, clinical management. So it still will fall within the bounds of what you've just alluded to.
Yes, so I think the question here is when you are doing your, when you're getting those samples for your testing, are those samples being given to you in the context of you are responsible for, for confirming or diagnosing whether somebody has got COVID-19, or are these samples that have already been diagnosed as having COVID-19 and you're simply validating it against the new technology? Because if you're being given, for example, samples, and the samples are depending on you for testing for diagnostic purposes with an investigational assay, that would be obviously problematic because we don't know whether the assay has been validated or not, accurate or not. You can't, of course, either conclude that somebody has COVID or doesn't have COVID. You're going to have to benchmark it with an approved diagnostic to know whether it's actually valid or not. So, I think from where I'm going with this is that if you're looking at an investigational diagnostic, there has to be some sort of benchmark. And especially, what is the primary purpose of why it was given to you? Was it given to you because, in other words, were these samples already tested and confirmed, and those people have been informed, and you're using these samples now just to validate your diagnostic and to see whether you come to a similar type of conclusion? Or is this given to you de novo, no other diagnostic has been done on it, and you have been given this in the context of a service provider rather than as a tester and validator?
Thanks, Jerome.
Thank you so much for that very thorough answer. I'm just going to take two questions from the chat. Thank you, Dr. Jackson, for posting the two questions. So, but both are for Dr. Nair around. Well, sorry, one is for Dr. Nair around GCP, and the other is a question around POPIA. So, perhaps Prof Singh, if you may field that one. So the first question is, do those of us with existing GCP certificates have to renew them now to be in accordance with the new guidelines, or can we wait for our regular renewal dates? So Dr. Nair, if you can perhaps field that one.
Okay, thank you for that question. So no, your existing GCP certificate holds until the expiry date, but you do need to supplement with training on current on the new GCP guidelines. But it does not. It can be in-house training for the new GCP guidelines. It does not have to be provided by an outside accredited provider.
Thank you so much, Dr. Nair. Shanuka, would you like to comment on that issue? Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Burgess. So just to add on further, that Research Ethics Committee members are also required to have GCP's certificates in order to review clinical trials. Thank you.
Thanks, Prof Singh. Very important point. So the similar requirement then would hold for Research Ethics Committee members then in terms of updating their GCP training. Thank you. And then moving on to Dr. Jackson's second question around who in an institution is going to be ensuring that all new research projects are in compliance with the POPIA. Oh, sorry, Prof Singh, you're muted. Sorry for that.
Okay.
There we go.
Okay, can you hear me now? Okay, so I said that's a very good question, and I think each institution has what is known as, or has to have a hat wearing called an information officer. So I think each university has got an information officer, and this is basically the person who would be responsible for ensuring compliance. And that person is deemed to be the responsible person. But at the end of the day, it's going to be every investigator's responsibility as well for ensuring this. And at this point in time, there has been lots of discussion as to whether research ethics committees are capacitated to play this gatekeeper role or not. But I think this is something that's still a work in progress. And this is something that's come up even in the context of SAF's code of conduct in terms of who's responsible for ensuring compliance. But I think the important thing here is that each institution has to have somebody who's wearing the hat of an information officer and who's basically taking the role of the responsible officer for ensuring compliance. And I think there may be differences between, for example, a research ethics committee that's vetting applications and another person who may be responsible for compliance with the POPI overall. So, there may be different levels and each institution may have that differently or, operating differently. But I think at the end of the day, it's very important for investigators as the starting point to understand what what their obligations are in terms of POPI, because at the operational level and at a site level, it's not the information officer of an institution, neither is it the research ethics committee after they've approved the research who's going to be responsible for this. This is, each site has to have, some sort of training, I would advise, to to make clinicians and study staff quite aware of what the obligations are under POPI, because this is something that's of course coming up on a day-to-day basis rather than with a research ethics committee, which is right at the beginning and they're giving approval and they're not monitoring this on a day-to-day basis. And neither other structures like, for example, a data and safety monitoring board or committee, they're not monitoring these issues. So I would say, it's very important for site training to occur so that study staff are quite aware of what their obligations and duties are under the POPIA.
Thank you, Prof Singh. Thank you so much. Apologies, I'm not sure who is unmuted and if they have a question. Sorry. Thank you. So there is another. Thank you, Dr. Jackson, for confirming your question is answered. Thank you. There is another question in the chat, and it's from Prof. Stephen Mago from I think Nelson Mandela University. Welcome, Prof. And the comment is RECs and universities comprise of members from medical and non-medical backgrounds, making it difficult to strike a balance. How can this be improved? So, Prof. Mago, I'm going to ask the committee to respond, but please, if you have any follow-up questions, please might you unmute and just discuss as well. Thank you. And so anyone from the panel who wishes to take that forward, thank you.
Thank you, Professor Burgess. I'll start and then maybe the other panel members can add on. So I think it's very important from a REC constitution perspective to have diversity both in the expertise as well as in the kind of value that is brought in terms of gender, in terms of demographic profiles, in terms of experience, etc., so that the review process can be as realistic as possible, and that while we have this divide between medical and non-medical, we need to also consider in terms of, for example, what role does a layperson have on the ethics committee? Again, bringing about that reality, bringing about a contextualization of the research so that the findings can also be pertinent as well as can be applied in terms of the research setting. I hope that's helpful and the others can add on. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. Singh. Maybe if I could possibly ask a slight follow-up question. The composition of RECs is described in the NHREC guidelines to, as you say, encourage that diversity of membership. Is there anything you'd like to add regarding that?
So again, in terms of the diversity, in terms of the composition of membership, we are looking, for example, if it is a health-related an HREC, then you're looking at members who have got both medical experience in terms of qualitative research, quantitative research, legal experience, people with care facilities or experience in terms of caring from a care perspective. A membership or a member with, for example, a lay person, we are not really having the kind of scientific expertise that is required, again, to bring about this community perspective in terms of what can be provided to the review process. Again, ensuring that there is a turnover in terms of the duration of the membership. For example, to ensure that a REC member is appointed for about 3 years, 3 to 4 years, depending on what the SOPs are for that particular institution. So ensuring that there is a turnover of staff, of members, that there is capacity building that's occurring as well, in terms of ensuring that new members are brought, new younger academics are brought into the Research Ethics Committee as well, so that there's also continuity in terms of REC functioning and operationalization. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. Singh. So, Prof. Mago, please let us know if we have addressed your question. If you could just confirm if there are any follow-ups. Thank you. There are 3 hands, so I'm going to take them in the order that they've popped up. So first, Dr. Tiwo Matande. Thank you, Tiwo.
Thank you so much. I have a question for Joseph. Joseph, from your research, thank you so much for that presentation. It's good to know about what is happening in Uganda. But I wanted to know, what is your recommendation on incidental findings which don't have a treatment? I don't know if that question is clear. Yeah, that's the question that I had. Thank you.
Thank you. Prof. Chieng.
Yeah, thank you, Tiwo, and good afternoon. Yeah, our findings show that the researchers and the research regulators are a bit cautious when it comes to sharing findings of genomic research, both individual as well as the incidental findings. However, the communities, the people who have participated in research, as well as the patients, for them, they feel like if it's anything that is found in their test, then it should be communicated to them. Because they need to know if you have an incidental finding that is going to affect your health, you need to know so that you plan, so that you warn the loved ones who might be affected by that. So at the end of the day, we'll have to come up with the guidelines that you will be able to appropriately guide sharing of incidental findings with the participants who will have been tested. So I think we'll come up with the guidelines that will protect these individuals' information when it's being shared. So that is safe, but they also need to know, because in our setting, many times we do not have chance to do genetic and genomic testing. So if you've been tested either as a research participant or something like that, and then you're not told, you don't know. And many times for us, the scientists, we feel we need to protect these people. We don't have to tell them they are scared, we will cause trouble. For them, they are saying no. Whether you tell me today or not, it will come up if it's a condition. So tell me now so that I plan for tomorrow. So I think we should tell them, but we have to come up with a clear approach to telling them. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Prof. Achieng. Tiwa, does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you so much.
Great, thank you. So next is Prof. Mark Blackman. Mark, thank you.
Thank you. So I've got a general question. So I'm worried about this issue around capacity development and how we deal with that. And so I actually think being on an ethics committee is very difficult. And I think that establishing, we talk about the 10,000 hours to be an expert and the kind of experiential learning that you require to fully grasp the requirements to be on an ethics committee. So I've got two questions. One is I disagree with the 3-year turnaround. I think it's a very short amount of time to be able to establish proficiency and to be able to have seen as much as you can, to be able to advise and give good feedback with integrity to investigators. And I want to add to that is that we seem to talk about what is required, GCP certificates, all these training sessions. But what I'm not hearing is how many protocols do you actually have to review as an ethics committee to be able to do this work, to be able to be true to what the mission of protecting vulnerable participants are, and so that you've seen enough and you have enough experience to be able to adjudicate. And if you look at what's happened in the COVID-19 space and the complexities and the requirements, I think that a rapid turnover of members is not correct. And I do believe that, and I'd like to understand how many protocols an ethics committee should be reviewing, what type of protocols. Otherwise, it's just a numbers game. And it's not really the proficiency and experience that we require to truly facilitate the protection of vulnerable participants. Thank you for the opportunity and for a wonderful 2 days.
Thank you so much for the really thought-provoking questions. Much appreciated. Because of the colleagues, very diverse nature and experience in RECs themselves, I'm going to open this to all members of the panel. So, would anyone like to begin the response? Thank you. Thank you. Thanks, Prof. Jerome.
I totally agree with Mark, and I think, you can have your nominal 3-year appointment period, but, a lot happens in those 3 years. You find sometimes members don't attend meetings. Sometimes people join research ethics committees for a nice posting on their CV, and they don't necessarily have, good experience at the end of the 3-year period. And I think that the way that terms are structured is one issue, but I think there has to be some sort of way where, my wish would be that there would be a qualitative way to evaluate quality of review, because you'll find very often people may serve a 3-year term, they don't yet have the experience of giving a good review even by the end of the 3-year period. It's something that you develop with experience over a longer period of time. And I think that on the other side, you've got high turnover on research ethics committees. Many research ethics committees, people join them for the wrong reasons. They don't understand the commitment involved. They don't understand that you should technically be reading every page and not just the informed consent form to understand if the informed consent form is actually accurate and is actually correctly conveying the potential risks and benefits of the protocol. And many people, when they realize they've got to read 300 pages and do a report, you find that, the turnover becomes quite high. Alternatively, they do really poor quality reviews. So I think, there is a balance here between a high turnover and a term period. At the end of the day, I agree with Mark that you shouldn't, you usually accrue experience the longer you serve on a committee. And that's an important factor to put in, to take into consideration with appointments and retention as well.
Thank you so much, Prof. Shanuka, and then Prof. Ochieng.
Thank you so much, Prof. Blackman, for that question. And I do agree with you in terms of the tensions that can be created with the stipulated guidelines in terms of the appointment period for REC members. And that I do also understand that there are members, that some members are absolutely I would say irreplaceable on the ethics committee in terms of the expertise that they bring in, specifically in terms of the historical memory, as well as for institutional memory purposes as well, that these members really do play a critical role on the REC overall. But suffice to say, again, what we do need to also accept that take a country like South Africa, we have RECs that are at different levels of development. RECs are very much, again, reviewing protocols in terms of what are the needs of a particular institution. So therefore, some RECs would be reviewing very few protocols as opposed to other RECs that are absolutely busy and may have over 1,000. I know of RECs that are reviewing 2,000 applications per month. So it again very much depends on the institution in terms of the institutional demands that are placed on the REC. But suffice to say again that it is important for RECs in general to be able to actually be part of this community of having to communicate in order to share best experiences, in order to also perhaps maybe engage in aspects of how we build capacity across RECs. So we talk a lot about building capacities within an institution for the REC that exists, but what about building capacity across RECs in the at a country level, of which at one point at least the regulatory body, which is the NHREC, plays that role in terms of having to link RECs together. But at the same time, I think RECs in the same region, for example, there are a number of RECs that are operating in a region, yet they tend to do so in silos without really communicating. And there is, and we have to also be very critical of this, that there are also issues of suspicions amongst RECs, especially when it comes to the review processes, when it comes to reciprocity. So how do we then build that trust? We talk a lot about trust at community levels. We talk a lot about trust at researcher levels, but what about trust at REC levels as well? So therefore, this need for capacity building goes beyond simply the reviews of the protocols. I think we need to look at how we actually build capacity across the RECs in the country as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Prof. Shanuka. Prof. Ochieng.
Thank you. It's a very interesting question and probably no answers, but I'll just give my perspective. In the Ugandan setting, we've had challenges, but we've tried to address them. It's not completely binding, but some of the approaches we've used is twinning the RECs. You twin an experienced REC with the one that is coming in, that is new, so that these members get to be mentored, they gain some experience, and then maybe they can start doing some of the work. Then the other aspect would be a REC should have experienced members, and then the new ones that coming in, just like you see a university, you'll have a professor and then all the way down. So that you don't have completely new or only experienced people. And when the ones that have been around are going, it's staggered. They don't all leave. A few leave, and then a few stay to mentor the incoming individuals to be able to gain some experience. I know it may not completely work, but those are some of the approaches. And then the other one we've used is the credit point system, whereby you evaluate the REC members' activities over the past 12 months before they continue being a member of the REC for the next 12 months. Have they undergone any training? Have they attended meetings? How many meetings? How many whatever? So all those ones are ranked and you're given a score point. So if you score below the pass mark, then you're considered you're not really active enough in the activities of a REC. So you may not be allowed to continue participating. But they are all new things that are not strictly implemented. But I think if we get more strict and implement them, maybe it could add to addressing the question raised, but it may not be complete. Thank you.
Thanks, Prof. Achieng, for that really interesting answer. I think your scoring system of REC member contributions is very interesting. And if you're able to share it, the chat is open. I don't know if you'd be able to post it in the chat. I think colleagues would be very interested to see it because it addresses some of the issues that Prof. Jerome raised earlier. Dr. Naya, I know you also wanted to comment on this matter. Thank you.
Thank you, Teresa. I agree with Joseph. I feel like some of the responsibility should lie with the REC itself in terms of capacity building. You shouldn't just have the one training when you join the REC and then you with the REC for 3 years without any additional training being provided, and also because someone can join an REC and at the end of the 3 years, I think this point was brought up, but having not made any significant contribution or developed in any way in terms of ethics review. So I think RECs should be responsible for building capacity. And also the other issue is around time. Time is an issue, right? I mean, everyone else has their day job, and then the REC members during the weekends or after hours. So how do you build capacity and encourage people to get more involved when they have so many other commitments?
Thank you so much to Dr. Nair. Prof. Blackman, I know it's a difficult issue. I hope we have, thank you. Thank you for your response. Then I see the next question in the chat, but apologies, Debbie Sabata. I'm terribly sorry, I can't see your title on your profile, but you've had your hand up for a while, and please may you ask your question. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm Debbie from Makerere University. Thank you all for the beautiful presentations. My question goes to Dr. Nair, and it's particularly about the use of electronic signatures. What is your comment where people choose to use initials or just type their surnames in place of the actual signing? Because I've seen documents being sent back for reasons that the person the person who was meant to sign the document may not actually be the one who signed it. I would like to know what your comment on that is. Thank you.
So, so that type of signature using initials or copying and pasting signatures from other documents is actually not acceptable. So you should you be using some sort of formal system like DocuSign to create your electronic signature, and that signature must be accompanied by a date, a time, and also what were you signing. You need to acknowledge that.
Thank you. Sorry, is your question answered, or do you have any further follow-up?
No, thank you. Thank you.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you so much for the great question. Please go ahead. Sorry, I realized I muted myself. Sorry, Prof. Mega, thank you so much for your hand. I was just reading your comments in the chat. Please go ahead. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to check from the colleagues with experience. You find that in universities there is research ethics apathy among academics. They feel that research ethics protocols delay the process of research, and some get to an extent where they don't, they disagree with, REC members when they receive comments with regards to their protocols. Through your experiences, how are you managing that, the relationship between REC members and researchers in universities? Thank you.
Thank you. Prof. Shanuka, would you like to take the first answer? Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Margo, for that very interesting question. So there is a lot of tension that exists between the REC and researchers. And a lot of it, again, would go to the issue around expertise, around what type of expertise does the REC have to ask the kind of questions. Researchers will also complain that these protocols have been presented at scientific review committees. Therefore, there is no need to actually have this additional layer of questions. And sometimes the questions will border on absolute nonsensical aspects according to researchers. So there's always this tension that exists between the research community and the Research Ethics Committee in general. But suffice to say that having spent many, many years on many research ethics committees and multiple research ethics committees, one of the ways of having to again look at is ensuring that the process of how the REC engages and communicates with researchers is absolutely important in terms of the transparency, also in ensuring that when those reports are generated and submitted, that it is done so in a clear, concise manner that is, again, taking into account queries. What research ethics committees do is send queries because adequate information was not provided, rather than actually having to become prescriptive. So if there's an engagement where you ask a query and you allow the researcher to engage and also rebut, if the researcher feels that he or she has actually developed an approach that he or she can defend, then there should be this engagement that occurs rather than a prescriptive approach. So therefore, again, a lot of it has got to deal with what type of engagement is in place and how do you ensure that there is also this open door policy as well, that if researchers have any kind of questions or queries around the reviews or around the reports that were generated, that there is a process in place where they can actually communicate with the REC chair to actually gain perspective in terms of the reports that have been produced and submitted. At the same time, researchers also should be given the opportunity to actually sit in the Research Ethics Committee meetings, because in that way they get a clear first-hand approach or a context of why these questions are being generated and what is also, where are the Research Ethics Committee members coming from, so that you also close the gap and the disconnect that can occur between the Ethics Committee and the researchers in general. Thank you. I'll pause here.
Thank you so much, Prof. Shanuka, for that comprehensive answer. Prof. Margo, has your question been answered appropriately? Or would you like any further follow-up?
Yeah, very helpful.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
No, it has been answered appropriately. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Great. And then apologies, Mr. Manuel, Ashwin Manuel, your question in the chat. Colleagues, the question is, how can the power relation between RECs and community members be improved to combat the trust question? Not sure who would like to, again, take the first stab at answering that. And just to note that Prof. Margo indicated in the chat that naturally having, a community representative on the REC can facilitate that. But are there any further comments? I think that trust is an interesting theme because, you know, Prof. Shanuka, it was mentioned, you know, as part of the issues around your talk around biobanking and the need to build engagement and build trust. And again, it's a theme that came up consistently yesterday in our discussions, you know, how to really ensure that authentic engagement to make sure we are addressing the needs of the community and not, you know, almost just, you know, tick boxing a process to meet a requirement. So Prof. Shanuka, would you like to comment?
Yes, thank you so much, Prof. Burgess. So I think first and foremost, it is important to first acknowledge that the power relations do exist. Because if we don't acknowledge that, then we are not going to be able to manage it. Secondly, the REC is not directly engaging with communities, but rather we have a representative on the REC. Because again, remember that the function of the REC is the protection of participants through the review of protocols. So our function is a review of protocols, and through that there is this indirect communication that occurs at the community level. But we have the representative, which is a lay person, which could be, well, ideally should be from the community. And how again do we manage that power dynamic that can exist within an REC? Because here you now have a group of scientists or academics, non-academics sitting together, and here we have a lay person. And remember that the structure is such that the composition may have one or two members, and in most cases it ends up with a single member. So how does one then ensure that we address this within this REC setting itself? And like I said, first and foremost is to acknowledge that the power differentials do exist. Secondly, to ensure that the layperson is given adequate time to express their views, that they feel comfortable enough to be able to do so, that there is always room for communication, and that there is ongoing facilitation, and that the rec chair is able to also ensure that the facilitation of such conversations will include the layperson as well, so that you can get this community perspective that we are requesting for. And through this process, we hope that trust can be built at a wider level. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Prof. Shanuka. Dr. Nair, you wanted to comment.
Yes, I wanted some clarification around the trust issue. Is it between the researcher and the community, or is it between the REC and the community? Because as Shanuka pointed out, the REC doesn't have any real direct contact with the community, and really depends on the researcher to indicate that measures have been put in place to engage with the community, and in your application to the REC, that needs to be clearly laid out. What steps have been taken to engage with the community? Is there a CAB in place? And you know, is the CAB appropriate if you're doing studies with adolescents? Is there a youth CAB, and so on? And I feel like researchers and meet with communities via their CABs on maybe like a monthly basis. And you know, CAB members are really, they feel comfortable when they hear that the protocol has been reviewed by an ethics committee, and the ethics committee raised a few of these queries, and this is what we responded, and they feel reassured that their welfare and safety is being looked after. And so the other way to address this, if there is an issue, a trust issue between the REC and the community, is maybe to invite an ethics committee member to come to a CAB meeting and answer specific questions. I know time is an issue, but somehow, like in the research setting, when we have to address issues around trust and what happens to my samples and so on, in the past, what has happened is investigators have allowed participants to come into the site and see how their extra samples are destroyed and look at the actual processes that happen in a site. And so maybe getting an REC member to attend a CAB meeting and answer some of these questions.
Thank you so much, Dr. Naya and Prof. Ochieng. Thank you. Sorry, you are muted. Sorry about that.
Yeah, thank you. Just to add to what my colleagues have said, in Uganda, we have something after the approval of the study, and when it's being conducted, we visit the site of the study. One, to assess whether it's adequate. For example, if it's a clinical trial, if it has adequate facilities to do the work ethically, but also to monitor progress and assess aspects like informed consent and all other aspects of the study. And depending on the study, if it's a community-based study, whereby in this case, a community is a geographical community, that the REC could visit the community and find out to assess whether the community actually is aware that they are participating in research and what other issues that are involved. So with the monitoring, you could still find out if there was adequate community engagement to some extent. Yeah, of course, sometimes the researchers would prefer to allocate you particular individuals to speak to. But if you've gone to the ground, I think you can choose who to talk to. And if you talk to the community leaders, you could find out whether the community is aware this is research. If it's within a hospital, still there is that patient community and the individuals who participate. Sometimes when you talk to them, you'll find out whether actually these people know they are actually research participants or they just think they are patients, and you'll pick out aspects of inadequate informed consent as well as aspects of probably lack of community engagement and so on. So I think it's depending on where you are and how you do things, there is no direct answer, but you use a number of approaches to try to come up with something that is acceptable and meaningful. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Prof. Joran, would you like to add to this conversation?
Oh, no, I think everybody's
sorry.
covered this really well. I don't even want to replicate anything.
Okay, brilliant.
Quite well.
Yeah, thank you so much. And Prof. Ochieng, thank you for highlighting the need for monitoring, you know, from RECs. I think that's an incredibly important point. Colleagues, I can't see any other hands or, oh, sorry, Prof. Meadley, please go ahead.
Thank you, Teresa, for chairing the session so well. I just wanted to check if we covered the point of the return of results and impact of POPI in terms of sharing, you know, sharing research results with other family members. I wondered if Prof. Singh could comment on that. Jerome Singh.
So, Kamantri, I think your question was, how does POPI impact on sharing of research results with family members? Are you talking about a living participant or participant who has since died? Because
no, a living participant, Jerome.
I think a lot would depend on what the person who's the study participant has given informed consent for, and you know what's his or her current state of. Because it's not clear here. Are they? I think probably there's so many different things that come into my mind when you asked your question. Is this a disclosure issue to parties at risk, or is this a situation where the person has been diagnosed but they're no longer able to communicate to their family members? Because there are slightly different contexts there. But and I'm not sure if you're talking about either one, but I would say that there's differences between disclosure obligations and notification obligations. And sometimes you'll find that certain statutes impose disclosure obligations to identified or identifiable parties at risk. But sometimes there are no statutes that actually outline this explicitly, so this becomes a moral obligation. And so you'll find that in an absence of a statute obliging somebody to make disclosure to a party at risk and identify a party at risk, the investigator or sometimes a clinician may feel that they are morally obliged to inform that party at risk. The same thing has come up in the context of HIV, the same has come up in the context of TB sometimes. So I think there are differences between disclosure obligations and notification obligations. Notification obligations are generally seen to apply to relevant authorities. So you'll find that you are obliged to notify the Department of Health, but you may not be obliged to notify a member of the family, as an example. Those notification obligations are outlined in specific statutes and in certain regulations of those statutes, and they specify who can be notified. So I don't know if I've quite answered your question, but there are differences between notification and disclosure. And if the person, for example, is no longer able to communicate, then of course, you'll find that the immediate family can actually, be told about it, because they may be responsible, for example, for the clinical decision making of that person as surrogate decision makers. So I don't know if I've actually answered your question, but I didn't know which angle you were focusing on.
Thank you, Jerome. That's perfect.
Brilliant, thank you. Sorry, Prof. Achieng, go for it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I'm just following up on Jerome's answer. I'm just wondering, because the context matters. For example, on a typically Western model where individuals are individualistic, it's my results and they remain to me. In a setting which tends to be more communal, like most of us in Uganda, when I'm sick, when I go to hospital, when I'm tested, I normally come with someone from the family. It could be my husband, it could be my wife, it could be my son, and so on. And as I go through the process of being informed of the test, being counseled about the testing and the results, and being provided with the results, I'm with this person already. So many times people don't come alone to hospital. And I think that's what I've seen in my research, whereby people say, after all, even if I don't tell them, they are the ones who are going to take care of me when I'm not well, when I fall sick because of that condition. So hiding it is just temporary. Still, they will know, because they will have to know that my diagnosis sometimes contribute financially and meet the cost of taking care of me as well. So the context tends to really matter a lot in this case. Thank you.
Thank you. Prof. Jerome, please go for it.
Yeah, sorry, I forgot to just mention that, of course, with COVID-19, there's slightly different obligations as well, because you've got contact tracing. And so you'll find that, relevant people who have come into contact, these are people who may not necessarily even be next of kin, but they may need to be contacted and notified that they may have been put at risk through exposure to somebody who's actually been diagnosed with COVID-19. And usually, but not always, it's usually health authorities that are delegated that responsibility. So, that is quite distinct in relation to COVID-19. It's not necessarily the case, of course, with many other diseases, especially with non-communicable diseases. That's not obviously an issue.
Right, colleagues, thank you so much. So it is just after 12 o'clock. So I'm going to bring this panel discussion to a close. I'd really just like to acknowledge all of you for your fantastic contributions and the interesting discussions that arose. I think particular highlights for me were some of the practical implications of implementing guidance, obviously from GCP, but also around the guidance to ethics, to research ethics committees. Trust has been such a common theme over the last 2 days, and it's so interesting for me that in a discussion around regulatory and guideline updates that are there to, in fact, protect individuals and obviously research participants, and also to improve the integrity of research, that trust really does underlie all of that. And Jerome, you spoke about the moral obligations we have in addition to obviously the regulatory obligations, and I think the intersection of two of those concepts is very important. So thank you, colleagues, for a wonderful panel discussion. I would just now like to hand over to Prof. Mubi for a vote of thanks and to close the session. Thank you.
So thank you very much, Teresa, for your excellent chairing of the session. The debates have been amazing, the discussions, the questions, it's really been such a wonderful session. And I'm beaming with pride to see all my ARESA graduates and my current PhD students making such an amazing contribution to this event. As you all know, in 2020, there was no ARESA seminar for the first time ever. We were all paralyzed with the pandemic and had no idea how we would ever host this wonderful wonderful in-person event again. But this year we were determined to do it online. We did have long discussions about a hybrid event, but with the third wave in South Africa, decided that it would be in the best interest of everyone that we kept it fully online this year. So thank you all for trusting us to host it this way and for joining us and participating so actively. Thank you to all the wonderful speakers who've really, given us such high quality presentations and have kept the ARESA flag flying. So thank you all. To my staff in the center as well, Dr. Obasa, who's worked tirelessly on this project behind the scenes, a very big word of thanks to you, to Sheena Steenkamp and Michelle Padiachi, who have been working behind the scenes with the administrative aspects. Dr. Lulu Nair, who's joined our center, has also added so much value in the short time she's been with us already. And I think we have just an amazing team, putting this all together. So thank you, everybody. That have emerged from these 2 days are extremely valuable, and we hope that this will assist research ethics committees around the country, that this will impact on guidance development at NHREC, and that it will, at the end of the day, just contribute to high quality research in the country, on the continent, and to improved ethics review for all. Now, before we end the session, I just want to share some really amazing news with all of you. So the center applied for its 5th NIH grant last year, and we're very pleased to announce that we've been successful in our application, and we have been awarded a new grant to look at data science innovation in Africa. Our particular project is called REDSA, a new tongue twister for us to get used to, but research for ethical data science innovation in Southern Africa. Prof. Stuart Rennie has joined us from the US, even though it's an absurd hour in the morning. I think it's 5:30 a.m. there. So Stuart, I'm going to ask you to chip in a little bit via audio. And also just to thank all our collaborators on this project, Prof. Stuart Rennie and Prof. Eric Jungst from University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, Prof. Ken Goodman and Dr. Sergio Letuca from University of Miami, also a WHO collaborating center in bioethics, some of our consultants on this project, Prof. Jerome Singh, who's with us here today, and our ARESA PhD graduates, we hope, who will also lead the African Consortium on Bioethics Consultants who will be involved in this project. So some of our previous ARESA graduates, Prof. Walter Jaco in particular, who is going to be very actively involved in this project, together with the School for Data Science and Computational Thinking at Stellenbosch University, which is a brand new many of the School of Data Science. So we look forward to looking at the ethical, legal, and social issues. So it's an extremely exciting new venture on the cutting edge of science, And we're really excited, and we hope that, you know, it will contribute significantly to bioethics knowledge and understanding in South Africa. And yeah, watch this space. So we'll be sharing more information soon. Stuart, I'm going to hand over to you to close briefly from your side.
Okay, good morning. You can hear me? Good morning.
Yes, we can.
Okay, good morning from the United States. I'm going to keep this to a few words because I'm not known for my eloquence at 6 o'clock in the morning. I'd like to just reiterate the thanks for the speakers, the session chairs, and especially the organizers at the Center for Medical Ethics and Law have done a really fabulous job of putting this together, as well as the participants. And a lot of participants in these sessions over the last couple of days. The last couple of days have confirmed for me the need and the value of the seminar, as well as the resilience of the network of interested stakeholders who are part of it and have been part of it for years now. So I just want to say, yeah, thanks to you all. I've been following from afar at strange hours of the day and night. Listening to these sessions, which have been very informative and inspiring. I'm looking forward, as I guess all of us are, to a time when we can have this seminar in person. But it's good to know, if need be, how good this seminar can also be online. And I'd just like to end with that on an optimistic note, that this seminar, which to me is of great value, has a future one way or the other. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Stuart. Thank you for joining us. Thank you to everybody for making this event such a huge success. And hopefully we will see you all next year in person and have a hybrid conference going forward so that there's always an online option. So thank you very much, and goodbye to all.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.